Alrighty. Back for a second episode of the Moo and More podcast, joined by yours truly, Dr. Sergio Pereira and Dr. Vladimir Tadic of Azores Veterinary Practice. I hope that you guys enjoyed our first episode. We used it as just sort of an introduction, and then we went on a couple of rants regarding what types of things we want to talk about with our podcast, what topics we want to cover, and all that bonspiel that was expected for our first podcast. As mentioned in our first podcast, our goal was to do one episode a month. This episode is going to be for the month of February, and we don't want to go, I mean, you can speak on this too, but I think we just want to touch a little bit on food safety. Our last podcast, we talked about potentially doing a podcast regarding food safety and meat withdrawals and milk withdrawals and all that type of stuff. So I think that we can spend one episode just talking about that because I feel like it's a very important subject to cover. Before we get into that, though, as you can see, we have a couple of figurines on the table. And I'll let Dr. Pereira introduce these because these are kind of he started with the cow here, and then we've just evolved and adapted based on all the species that we see here at Azores. So take it over.
Yeah. Well, welcome. Excited to be here for the second episode of this podcast. Just circling a little bit back and kind of feed on what you just mentioned. Food safety. I think it's extremely important. There's a lot of questions out there. There's a lot of misinformation, a lot of fake news. So we wanted to touch base on that. We just went through in this area these past couple months. We just went through our dairymen, our clients went through avian flu, and that was something that I would like to talk a little about here today, and that goes with security and making sure that milk and meat are safe for the consumers in general. So I think there's a lot to talk about. We're going to keep it simple, but we want to project the idea, not project, but pass on the idea and the concept that we're doing a lot. A lot is done for the milk and meat that gets into the supermarket and ultimately into your fridge and homes and freezer.
Mm-hmm.
It's safe, probably one of the safest, if not the safest product that we have in the world. The products that we produce here in the U.S., North America, Canada included. Regarding our figurines, it started as a joke. We needed a mascot for the clinic. We did not need a mascot. We came up with the idea of having a mascot, so we started over here with Hortensia. Hortensia. It's a Portuguese name which means hydrangea. That's the main flower that we have in the Azores Island. So that's why we named her Hortensia. And then I started getting ideas about the other species that we see over here at Azores, and we end up adopting these other figurines, and I will introduce one by one. Over here we have Miss You for all our ovine producers, sheep producers. So her name is Miss You. This is the latest edition over here, and the name for this goat, it's Cristiano Ronaldo. I'm sure you
Greatest
guys
of all time.
greatest of all
I
times.
beg to differ, but
Messi sucks. So
we
and
need
then
viewers, Sergio. We can't
I
get
know,
rid of
I know,
people
I know, I
being
know.
up.
I'm sorry, but I still believe that Cristiano is better than Messi. But for another podcast, another day, another
Yeah.
episode. This chubby guy over here, his name is Linguiça, and it's kind of the way that we in Portuguese call sausage. So I think it's very fitting for this chubby little
Yeah.
guy. And then finally, this guy here, this is Dark Knight, and this is our horse, and this is Dr. Favreau's favorite of all of them.
Yeah, I wonder why.
I beg to differ. I think this girl over here should be the favorite for everyone. But they're all good, all important. And then we're gonna kind of these four over here are the ones that get into our tables, into our plates,
Yeah,
and
depending
and then
geographically, where
geographically,
you are,
yeah. I know there's certain parts of the world they
Yeah.
will eat horse meat, but that's something that we don't do over here in the U.S.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I do know that, for example, I think there's certain parts in Portugal that they do, and I'm sure there's
Yeah.
other countries in the world that they
We
they
have
do.
a horse processing facility in Canada.
Canada.
Yeah, but
Okay.
they're shutting their doors, if not already or soon. But yeah, they were long lasting.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah,
most of
so-
it's all going to European markets. So
European markets.
not
Good deal.
domestic.
Good deal.
Yeah. So yeah, essentially what we just want to cover is the things that we do and the things that I guess we can say pharmaceutical companies do, and the testing and the hoops that they jump through to ensure that what we're treating these animals with these sick animals at times, is something that's not going to be in a detectable amount once that product is actually being on the shelves, sold to consumers. So for any of our viewers that are watching, why don't you just explain what like meat and milk withdrawal actually stands for?
So that has to do with the residues that the medication we have. We have two medications here on the table. This is an antibiotic, a cephalosporin. This is an anti-inflammatory, antipyretic, and this is flunixin meglamine. What it means is that whenever we inject or give by mouth, there's different routes of administration. A medication that can linger in the animal system for a while. There's the potential for residue to stay if you ingest milk from that animal, or you eat meat from that animal. So there's studies done for each medication, antibiotic, anti-inflammatory, and hormones and whatnot. And those studies kind of show how long that medication stays in the body. So it has to stay for a while. There's some of them that their half-lives, meaning the time that they are doing their business inside of the body, is very short. But in the case of an antibiotic, there's different antibiotics and different times for that antibiotic to be processed and do what it needs to do, which is, for example, to kill bacteria. And we don't want any of these chemicals that are part of these antibiotics, anti-inflammatories, hormones, to stay in meat or milk, to be excreted in the milk, or to stay as a residue in the meat. So, like I was saying, there's studies done, and we know how long. And there's tests that you can do, milk testing. You can do meat. You can do kidneys. Like kidney is an organ that they like to test at these slaughter facilities, to test for residues. So when we're giving an antibiotic, there's a lot that goes into it, understanding which antibiotic to use, and then the time that that animal has to stay within the dairy or the operation, until that it's out of their system, and then they keep being sold for meat purposes, where that meat can be consumed and there's no risk of having antibiotic or any other medication or drug. We don't want those in milk or meat, because we don't want to create resistance on the human side, and we also don't want allergic reactions from the humans consuming that milk or meat. So meat withhold is how many days that animals needs to stay until we call it that, until we say that it's free of the medication, until the animal excreted that medication is not present anymore. And then the milk, the same thing, until it tests negative for that antibiotic, and which means that it's not in the milk anymore, and the milk can be consumed.
Yeah. So in our first podcast, we talked about how a large portion of the population is kind of detached from agriculture. Just for our viewers and our listeners, if you wouldn't mind explaining, let's go with dairy, the steps that are taken. So these animals are treated, obviously they need to be milked, so that milk is not held up within their udders, so we don't run into a bunch of other issues. So what types of things are done on the farm, from milking to the processing facilities picking up the milk? Just break that down for us so that people understand what levels there are to ensure that there is no residues within the product.
Well, there's a lot of steps. It's a lot of work and effort by us, by the dairyman, by the employees that are responsible for administering these medications. So let's start first. The clients are made aware, are educated by us and the industry. Like for example, the pharmaceutical industry. If they can go there, their vets can go there and talk about the medications. But there's an education component of this process where we're gonna inform the owner that if you use this antibiotic, then you're gonna have to keep this cow for these many days, or you're gonna have to discharge the milk.
Okay.
You know, the milk is not going to be going into the normal tank to be picked up by the processing plant and be mixed with other people's milk. So, for example, I have two, like I said, I have an antibiotic over here, a cephalosporin. For example, cephalosporins don't have a milk withhold, which means that they can be safely given to a cow for different treatments, respiratory disease, metritis, and whatnot, foot rot. And then this will not concentrate in the mammary gland, so we can still milk and it's safe. But it has, for example, this specific one has a meat withhold of 3 days. So you're going to educate your client that for a certain treatment protocol, for example, the cow is going to be injected with this antibiotic 3 days in a row. And then you start counting that meat and milk withhold from the last treatment. So for example, this one over here, it's a 3-day treatment. So by day 3, then that animal cannot be sold for another 3 days. So a total of 6 days, if it makes sense. 3 days for treatment, 3 days to wait. For example, this anti-inflammatory over here, flunixin meglumine, you give, and then there's a 48-hour milk withhold, and 36 actually, and then 4 days for the animal to be able to be sold for meat consumption.
Okay.
But on that part of training, that's when we come in, and that's when we are a big part of preventing residues getting into the general population. It's so these medications are prescription medications, so they can only be used under the directions of a veterinarian. So they come with their own label, own instructions, but FDA makes us do like a clinic label, which identifies the clinic that is prescribing, the vet that is prescribing this medication, and then we have instructions in here because sometimes we have to do what we call like an off-label prescription, where we either increase the amount of the medication. So then we have to account for that on our instructions to the dairies on meat and milk withhold. So that's the part that, like I said, it's extremely important for us to be on a very close and tight relationship with a client, with a dairy operator, beef operator. It doesn't have to be just dairies, where we're constantly reviewing these protocols and people are doing the correct protocols. They're following the dose. They're following the route of administration. There's different routes. For those of you guys that don't know out there, like you can give intramuscular injections in the muscle. You can do IV, so straight into the vein. So, and all that plays a role on the withholds and withdrawals. So we that's the first. It's us training, making sure. It is impossible. We don't have enough vets as is, and it is impossible for us to be there and medicating each animal. But if we are prescribing, we have to make sure that the right person is using it and is using it according to label and to what our label says. So that's our role, and we try to revise those protocols at least once a year, once every 6 months. Talk about them if there's any changes. In a new medication, or if the changes the label. So we are the point of contact, and we spread that information into our clients. So that's how we act in this case. And sometimes we dispense the medication, we give the medication and ourselves. But for the most part, we're dealing with big operations that have people that are trained. So education, making sure that they know how to use it, protocols and whatnot. And then The dairy itself or the producer then has to also be responsible for following these milk and meat withholds.
Yeah.
And how do they keep track of that? Records, written records, computer records. So the animal, all animals are identified. They have a number or a name, but mostly it's number.
Yeah.
And then that a treatment is applied, a protocol is used for a certain treatment, then that has to be on record. It has to show somewhere. So if there's a question, if there's a change in personnel that is working in the hospital area, that's usually where
Mhm.
these sick animals are treated. If there's any doubt, someone can goes to the records and see this cow received this amount, this route,
Yeah.
this day, these many days.
All the
So
details.
that's another way that the dairy itself makes sure that we don't get these residues. I mentioned the hospital, what we call hospital. So all these dairies have like a hospital dedicated pen or a couple pens where these
Mhm.
animals usually stay while they're being treated and while they are still with residue, while they're waiting for the residue to be over. So, and with that, we're trying to avoid. So usually, on most dairies, these animals are milked in a different location, so they're not milked in the main barn.
Mhm.
So to avoid any of this milk to go into the tank that is going to be
Cross-contamination.
picked up and taken into the processing plant. So
Mhm.
the dairy plays an active role on this. And then finally, the processing plants, for the milk side, the slaughterhouses,
Mm.
they will do their own testing to make sure that the carcasses are not leaving that facility and they tested positive for residue. I
Mhm.
do not think that they test every carcass, but they do enough testing,
Yeah.
and usually is kidney. It can be another organ, but kidney is something that it's an organ that is used to test for residues.
Mhm.
And that's also part of the USDA and the state veterinarians to kind of take care of that step. It's another step that is used. The milk processing plants, whenever they send their truck companies to go pick that milk,
Mhm.
before they put that milk in that tank, in that truck, they're going to take samples of that tank. And they're
Mhm.
going to, before they then get the milk into the processing plant, the truck driver comes in with all those samples, all the dairies that he picked the milk
Mhm.
from. And then there's testing done.
Yeah.
And then if they find residue, then they stop. That milk is not going to be used for
Yeah.
cheese or fluid milk. It's going to be dumped, and they're going to identify which dairy contaminated. That so there's another layer of security there.
Yeah.
So there's multiple. Like I said, vet plays a role. The dairy plays a role. The processing plants play a role. So we have quite a few. I'm gonna say not stop signs because it's not what's
Yeah.
called, but barriers and testing to make sure that at the end of the day, we're not going to get a product that has any medication,
Yeah.
any drugs on
Any
it.
significant amount.
Exactly.
Awesome.
That can cause problems. So,
Mhm.
good to talk about this because, as we mentioned in the first podcast, most people that are not in the business, they don't
Mhm.
have an idea about how things are
Yeah. And I feel like
carried.
there's a huge movement now for people knowing how their food is treated, how it's processed, where it's coming from. At least from the people that I talk to, they're all cognizant of these types of things, and they always have questions. So it's good to explain to people how a large industry does things and how it handles things, like you said, on many different levels. I
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I listened to a podcast from AABP, which is an association for bovine practitioners in North America, and I mean anybody can join it from the world. And they talked about pretty much the same thing in regards to these volatile levels of medications in food, and I feel like it's something that needs to be covered, and it's inevitable that these things are going to be treated. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
we have organic dairies, and we have organic producers that produce milk organically. And if an animal does end up needing to be treated, they kind of pull it and they put it into their commercial herd or they sell it or whatnot. So that's also something that we can talk about in a future
Oh,
podcast.
that would be hours talking about
Yeah, yeah,
organic operations and with the
yeah.
pluses and minuses with it. And
Hmm.
but what I think the main idea for today is that we work day in and day out, not just us, the industry in general, to make sure that we have a safe product.
Hmm.
And then so I would like also to take some time today to discuss a little bit about the HPAI outbreak, so
Yeah.
highly pathogenic avian influenza.
Hmm.
I know that there's been a lot of discussions out there, a lot of talk about it,
Yeah.
and I think the main scare was first, how did we get a virus that is a virus that usually affects avian, so birds,
Yeah.
be able to go to a different host, in this case cows,
Hmm.
and produce disease symptoms, clinical signs, and that's scary. And the industry, the government, FDA, they all work quick to find out, for example, how would this impact milk,
Mm.
because one of the first things that we found out when this came about a year ago
Mhm.
in Texas was that these animals were excreting this virus after it got in their system. They develop clinical signs, really high fevers,
Mhm.
respiratory distress, and then they also develop mastitis, which was kind of like this. It didn't add up correctly.
Oh,
So
dear.
by the time we figured out that it was coming and being excreted through the milk, that raised a lot of concern, because you
Mhm.
you don't want to put on the supermarket shelf milk that has
A
avian
virus.
flu,
Yeah.
a virus. And it was they quickly find out that the pasteurization process that we have
Mhm.
for milk over here in the U.S. Would take care, and we would not have any virus present in the milk. So
Mhm.
um, there's always challenges, but we're always trying to find solutions, and keeping in mind that we want a safe product
Yeah.
out there.
No, that's it's scary to think about, to understand. And I mean, even now they're talking about it potentially, like they found a new strain in dairy cattle. They're talking about the potential for it to eventually impact humans. So it's just something interesting to be a part of,
Yeah.
because I mean, being in vet school, you learn about these things and they talk about all these historical
Yeah.
outbreaks of disease and virus.
Yeah.
But to actually have your boots on the ground and at these dairies and seeing these cows and these animals being impacted by it, it's an eye opener for sure. And I mean, you mentioned the FDA and all the government organizations that tried. I mean, they dealt with it and they did what they needed to do. But then there's also things that they started looking into how these animals were treated,
Yes.
and certain medications that were used that can no longer be used in these
Yes.
animals. So, I mean, it was a time where everybody was stressed and everybody was
Oh,
worried,
absolutely.
and then you have a government organization saying that potentially the one thing that was bringing
Helping
these
them.
animals over to overcome this disease is something that we can no longer use.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's another topic. If you want
It
to talk
was.
about it, you can
No.
talk
It was.
about
It
it.
was. It was a big roller coaster for all of us, for
Yeah.
producers, government agencies,
Mhm.
professionals. It was.
Yeah.
It was something new. And why were people so scared of this? Is because we cannot be living in fear every day. Like
Mhm.
it's. But it was scary because we usually think about most viruses as what we say in the vet world, species specific.
Mhm.
So like a virus that causes the influenza or a flu symptoms in humans usually doesn't affect a cow or a
Yeah.
cat or a dog, and vice versa. The ones that affect the cows will not affect the humans. And the fact that this virus was able to mutate and go from birds to a different species, like in
Mhm.
this case the cows, it's the scary part of this. It's
Yeah.
it's you think, okay, if you mutated from birds to cows, what's
What's
not
next?
allowing it. Who's next?
Yeah.
Who's the next victim?
Yeah.
And the next victim, and we have to think about it. It's the human side. Other animals, of course, but the
Yeah.
human side. But yeah, it's out. It's not out. I think it's gonna be here for a long time. But
Yeah.
it was challenging. There was a lot of adaptation, a lot of because we had instead of having 1 or 2% of your herd sick like with a regular disease, like if it's
Yeah.
lameness or mastitis or respiratory disease, we went to a situation where we had like in certain situations 50% of the herd sick at the same time. And it's hard to put 50% of your herd on medication and withhold all that milk. But I think we worked very closely. There was a lot of freaking out, but a lot of learning.
Yeah.
We all learned a lot, producers and industry and veterinarians about it.
For sure.
Each day that passes, we learn more. But that's another an example of our role on providing a secure product to the table of our general population.
Yeah. Something I wanted to pick your brain about. I mean, not to date you or anything, but you've been in the industry and you've been a veterinarian much longer than I have. Have you seen this type of thing, like food safety, withdrawals, become more prevalent as you've progressed as a veterinarian, or has it always been like when you first started? Were people still on top of these things? Was the testing in place? Was all these barriers and all this stuff that we just mentioned evident at the time that you started, or as things evolved and become more and more advanced?
Okay, you just call me a dinosaur, but
That's gonna be our new mascot.
that's gonna be a dinosaur.
Hey, we
Um,
treated camels. We're gonna have to
Absolutely,
get a camel.
absolutely. Now, it's going to be almost 20 years, and there's a huge shift. There's,
Yeah.
in the industry. I would say with the advent of social media and general population access to like quick news, quick videos, and whatnot, it put a lot of pressure on the industry. I think we had in the past 20 years ago, we would have some really bad players that probably would not. Follow the rules.
Yeah.
Think about in some of these situations, someone can get by with something as simple as dilution, meaning it's just one animal in the mix
Solution to
with
pollution is
it's
dilution.
dilution. It's just one that got the meds. Like we're gonna mix with another 800 or 1,000 or 2,000 cows. There's not gonna be any residue. Maybe not. It's not gonna test positive for the residue, but it will. That residue is gonna end up in the food chain. So with that, with close collaboration with us professionals, the government agencies, I think they're taking this now very, very serious. Let's talk about the fact that if there's mistakes that happen, that's the importance of
definitely.
records that I mentioned a while back, the importance of taking notes. But sometimes someone forgets. I forget.
Yeah.
That's because I'm a dinosaur and old. But sometimes the people forget. Like an employee forgets to take note of a cow that he gave antibiotic. That cow ends up going. So if that producer is caught with a residue, there's consequences. There's repercussions. And then government FDA gets involved in that. And then if it's someone that is doing it, I'm not going to say on purpose because I don't think anyone wants to cause a residue on purpose. But let's say that more lax. There's 3 violations in 18 months can get
really?
can get a dairyman out of a milking permit.
Oh, okay.
So
I didn't
there's
know that.
fines, there's jail time.
Yeah. I
Now,
know about the
there's-
fines, but I didn't know.
There's major consequences, and one of those consequences could be revoking their milk or meat permit.
Interesting.
And so that's something that we talk and we try to not scare in a bad way, but we have to take this serious.
Yeah.
We
no,
have
for
to
sure.
take this serious. It is
Everyone-
serious.
Everyone gets held accountable, and like you said about the whole social media thing, I feel like it's so easy now for a mistake to happen, or somebody who, like you said, is potentially maybe doing these things on purpose, for news to get out quick and that
Absolutely.
person to get that attention that they don't really want.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then again, we unfortunately we have a lot of people out there, many organizations actively working against this industry.
Yeah, that's true.
They suck, but they're doing what they believe is right,
Yeah.
and we're doing what we believe is right. But they are, and they're after stuff like
Yeah.
that to cause more stains into this
Yeah.
this industry.
But I also
And
feel like their influence, sorry to interrupt, their influence might have pushed that grain to go towards more control on the
oh, absolutely.
industry,
Oh, yeah.
more testing and more safety.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's a catch-22. Like there's good and there's bad to it. But sorry, didn't go ahead.
No. That's right. And we saw you just briefly mention and lightly mention, but one of the issues that we had during avian flu is these animals were having really high fevers. To put half of your herd, like if you're milking 1,000 cows and you're gonna put half of your herd on a medication like this, flunixin meglumine, that's
Yeah.
what we usually use to get fevers to come down. So this is what's anti-inflammatory, antipyretic.
Yeah.
You can, like, then you're gonna dump half of your milk. So our other option for a situation like that was the use of aspirin, like humans use. Aspirin is not an antibiotic, but there was not enough studies done out there to see the impact and the residue level of aspirin, for example, in milk or meat. And it was social media that
Yeah.
it was someone that dislikes this industry a lot that stir the pot.
Yeah.
And was it wrong? Like maybe many of us will look at that and say, yeah, it was wrong, but was it also right? Yeah, it was also right because we don't have enough information.
Yeah.
But then we're between a rock and a hard place, deciding on saving these animals because when you have an animal with 105, 106, 107 of fever, that animal is very, very, very sick.
Yeah.
And we want to focus on that. But it was an emergency type of situation. I think are out of that for now. I
Knock
think
on
it
wood.
will come and it will affect herds forever, but not at the level that we
Yeah.
that we had these recent months. But yeah, there's we cannot do things just because someone can be out there looking out and waiting for someone to commit a mistake.
To mess
But it
up,
is
yeah.
important to know. I tell our dairyman, like if I see something that I dislike, like a behavior, let's not even talk about treatment, a behavior. I see like a calf or maternity, what we call maternity employees that usually are picking up the calves, treating the calves, giving colostrum to the calves, making sure to process that fresh cow. If I see one that is rough, that is picking up those calves, dropping them, like being just not doing things correctly,
Yeah.
I always go to management and I talk to him. I try to reason. If he doesn't want to reason with me, then I'm gonna go and talk to his boss, because it takes another employee or someone that is there to drop towels or to drop feed. Nowadays, everyone is a CNN reporter with one of these.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have used CNN because it could be problematic and called fake news. But no, it takes someone to take a video of that, and that dairyman can be in major trouble for something that is not a common
Practice. Yeah.
Exactly. And then so the videos that have come out with malpractice in animals, it's not all the animals at those places have been. And it's
Yeah.
usually a few bad apples. And unfortunately, like I said, we have people out there and organizations that are just looking for that
Yeah.
to expose and paint everyone with the same brush, which
Yeah.
is not fair. So
And it's like, it's not something that our clients or our producers want to keep around either. Like they appreciate us coming to them and talking about these things because at the end of the day, it's their business, it's their name. So if we help them out by saying that, they're just going to get rid of that person. And
oh, absolutely.
but the repercussions might have already happened before they do that.
Absolutely. The going back a little bit to the producers and talking about safety, something that still puzzles me a little bit is I still have a lot of the general population or when I start conversations with people that have no idea about the industry,
Yeah.
that have this idea that these dairymen, these are just big factories. Like it's just big factories. The cows are just milking machines, and that's it. And I invite people. We have dairymen that would welcome public to come in and see what they do and talk about what they do, and we need more of that happening because these people, for the most part, the majority of our clients, and you've been out for almost 12 months, you can attest to this. I think they love those animals.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
They don't look like them as machines. They don't want them to suffer.
Yeah.
They don't want them to be in pain. They want us to take care of them. They want us to teach the employees how to take care of them. You know, we get called to train how to deliver babies, but then when things get too hard, they call us right away to go out there and stop that suffering, try to solve the problem and stuff. So there is a lot of respect that goes from that owner toward that animal, toward that huge group of animals.
Yeah.
We still have a few dairymen that will know most of the cows by number, and they're
Yeah.
milking 1,000, and I say cow 2105, and oh, I know this
Yeah.
and that.
Yeah.
You know, there's a they
Yeah.
that's their bread and butter, but they don't see it just as a source of income.
Yeah.
They love what they do.
Yeah.
I tell people this story a lot. I was at a birthday party many years ago, and this lady was at this birthday party, and she asked me what I did, and I said I was a veterinarian. She was like, "Oh, I have so much respect because of dairymen and anyone that works for dairy, because you guys have something extra because of it's hard work 7 days a week." And I start laughing, not laughing on her face like making fun of her or anything, but she said, "Why are you laughing, doctor?" And I was like, "Because, ma'am, I think we don't have something extra. I think we're missing something because of how we are so, I'm not gonna say it, in love and how we respect these animals, how we care and want them to do to do well. So that's why we go through all these cold nights, being called at 9 p.m., 1 a.m. to go deliver a baby.
Yeah.
I don't want that cow to be there until 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 in the next morning.
Yeah.
So we care, the owners care, the industry in general care,
Yeah.
and we care about safety. We want a safe product.
Yeah, for
Uh-huh.
sure. And I mean, just like with everything, there's always ways and there's always areas that we can improve, whether that be from
Absolutely.
the veterinarian side, the
Yes.
producer's side, the employees at these operations. But it's one of those things that, like, the only way you are going to improve is to notice these things and to actually implement change, which I feel like we're doing a good job. And year to year, I mean, you're noticing things changing, like you said, from when you first started to where you are right now. Things have improved and people are becoming more accountable and more aware of these things. So I feel like the future of the industry, I mean, if milk prices go up and people can actually make money from what they're doing, I feel like the future of agriculture is strong. But
Absolutely.
unfortunately, I think it'll just contain less people because of historical events.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then our role, going back to that question that you asked me regarding the evolution of the profession, when I started almost 20 years ago, we saw a lot of vets just like on the dairy side of things to go out there and diagnose pregnancies. There's a major shift. Like we are there to do way more than that. We are there to be main players on this equation
Yeah.
that leads into safe product. And I tell people, I get to a dairy, a new dairy, or even our current dairies. I get there, I want to know, did we get an increase of the number of animals for that week going into the hospital? Why? Was it a mastitis? Was it a lameness and everything? And I tell people, it's not just because I'm Portuguese and nosy. Like, if I don't have the information, I cannot make a difference.
Yeah.
And I can make a difference by knowing what's going on, get very involved. I can ask you. So that's the philosophy of the practice over here, is to get as much involvement as possible in these operations, always thinking of the animal, of course,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, also thinking about the public, our families, our friends that are not in the industry but are gonna consume, going to go to the restaurant and get that
Yeah.
nice juicy steak,
Yeah.
or my kids drinking the milk at home.
Yeah.
We are, and that's one of the things that I enjoy the most, is that shift
Yeah.
in the profession, in the vet profession, with when it comes to our involvement in
Mhm.
educating clients, educating the public in general, educating employees, training,
Yeah.
be putting everything on the table.
Yeah.
So the more information we have, the better decisions, the better directions we're gonna be able to provide our clients with.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, for general public, I feel like even if I wasn't involved in the industry, I would kind of struggle to know who to ask or where to get my information from. But for any of those viewers or any people watching, feel free to reach out to us if you
Oh,
have any
absolutely.
questions,
Yep.
comments, or concerns. I mean, we're open to having conversation and to talk to you about these things that we talked about today and anything else that you might want to know about any industry, any animal agriculture, agriculture in general. Don't hesitate to reach out to us because we like educating people and we like talking about these things. But I think that was a good amount of coverage, and
I think so.
we talked about a lot. We started with meat and milk withdrawals, and then
Talk about the profession. and
transition to how
Yes.
us vets can impact this, and
Yeah.
I feel like it was very informative. I hope the viewers feel the same way. If you want to say anything else, feel free. We're at 41 minutes. But I
41?
think yeah,
Wow. Then we talked a lot.
yeah, we did.
No. Again, I will just go off of what you just said.
Mhm.
It's just, if people have ideas, they want it discussed, they want to have just a conversation, a one-on-one with us, we're open to have those conversations and try to educate. That's part of this podcast. The idea behind this podcast is to generate conversations. Generate conversation. We're not here. I'm not. We're not going to go over all the medications and
Yeah.
what they do and not do. That's for us and our clients and our
Mhm.
producers. But
If you're interested in
but if you're
that,
interested,
yeah.
yeah, we can talk about that too. But that would take a little bit longer.
Yeah.
It's just to have a frank conversation and
Yeah.
engage with us. If you guys have questions, doubts, if you guys don't agree with something that we said,
Oh,
let's
for
let's
sure.
let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Not be afraid of talking. I'm proud of the industry that I'm part of.
Yeah.
I believe in the industry that I am part of.
Mhm.
I respect the people that are against it. I have to respect that.
Yeah.
Disagree, but population is increasing. It's
Mhm.
not decreasing. We still
Yeah.
have a world to feed, world of
Yeah.
people to feed. So it's agriculture is still how we're gonna be able to feed
Yeah.
the population. So let's talk about it. Thank you for listening.
Yes.
Follow us again.
Yeah. We're on
toast over
Apple
here.
Podcasts.
Apple.
We'll eventually get on more
YouTube.
platforms once we get a little bit bigger. The video version you can find on YouTube. Our first podcast is already up there. And then the audio version is on Apple Podcasts. So we'll make sure to get that out here in the month of February. For the month of March, we're kind of playing everything by ear. We'll see what we decide to talk about, or if we decide to bring somebody on to discuss a certain aspect of the field that we're in, or anything else regarding veterinary medicine. But yeah, if you guys have any suggestions, get on YouTube, get in the comments section, write it down, message us on Instagram, Azores Veterinary Practice and the Moo and More podcast. Other than that, like Dr. Pereira said, we thank you guys for listening, and we hope you tune in for the next episode. Cheers.
Okay.
Good stuff. Number 2 done.